welcome. My name is Brian Caplen. I'm editor of The Banker. I'm here with Silvia Pavoni, who's the economics editor. And we're discussing the top 500 banking brands, which is the cover story on our February issue. So Silvia, I mean, we've been doing this since 2006. We'll be coming up to 10 years next year. It's a ranking that gets great traction in the market. What have been the key findings from this year's ranking?
Well, maybe first we should explain how this ranking is put together. It is put together by a consultancy, Brand Finance, which looks at branding across a number of sectors. Obviously, measuring banking brands is quite difficult. There isn't the same emotional connection that you can find in other consumer products, for example.
But they use the method of what they call royalty relief, which is basically the way I understand it is it's the amount of money that would be awarded in a court judgment if you had to value
that's one way
a
of
brand for commercial
looking
purposes.
at it, including litigation. The other way is that it's a licensing fee that a third party would have to pay when using the bank's brands. So that's a method that has been used. And
so who's come top this year?
Of this year confirmed that Wells Fargo is still the leading banking brand in the world. So Wells Fargo is still firmly at the top. But the news, which is quite interesting, is that Chinese banks are really growing their brand value. So we have ICBC, which is now in second position, up from sixth, if I'm correct. And the largest grower, if we can say that, is another Chinese bank, which is China Construction Bank.
Okay, now this is very interesting because we've always seen Chinese banks as obviously massively important in their own market, perhaps less significant overseas. But we've always seen them a little bit behind on the brand curve when you compare them to the international banks like Wells Fargo, Citi, HSBC, and so forth. So this seems to suggest that they're now making some headway in terms of their own branding and their own market position.
It does. This is what Brand Finance has found through a number of data providers, which went out to measure the trust and the value that users or consumers of banking products, both on the retail side and wholesale side, put on Chinese banks.
Okay, now that's what's the China story, but China's always a bit different. Even though it's an emerging market, it's rather in a special case. So what about other emerging markets? You know, how have they been faring? I mean, we have seen a trend over the years for Brazilian banks and Russian banks to do better, but what's happened this year?
You mentioned Brazilian banks. So from Latin America, we had the Brazilian bank at the top, Bradesco, which displaced Santander, who used to lead that table last year. And Bradesco
Bradesco is the strongest brand in Latin America?
Strongest brand in Latin America, and this is mainly explained by the fact that Bradesco seems to be seen by Brazilians as a bank that serves all needs. So it doesn't just handpick valuable customers.
Right, but this is hugely significant, isn't it? Because Santander has always had the regional franchise, whereas Bradesco has been more associated with Brazil. So now we're saying
purely Brazilian, but in terms of brand value, higher than anybody in Latin America.
Okay, and what about on the private banking front?
On the private banking side, you probably can expect that it's going to continue to be a conservative ranking, so conservative names still being there. UBS is the leader of the ranking. Once again, we actually don't see any emerging markets names in that list.
Okay. Now, as well as the ranking, we also have a conference in London. The theme of that is the technological challenges for banks.
Which is another theme that actually keeps on coming up when we look at branding. Brand Finance again has found that a lot of effort has been put by pretty much all banks around the world into improving their communication, the technological communication with customers. But you're going to speak at the event, Brian. What else do you think is going to be discussed?
Well, the main theme of the conference this year is technology and how banks are rising to the challenge of technology. And I think it sort of falls into two areas, really, because on the one hand, you've obviously got a lot of sort of technological angles in banking now with social media and mobile banking and online banking. And you've got new players coming up who are, experts in these areas. So people who are just doing online banks or, people who are actually telecoms companies who are kind of stealing a bit of the banking business. So we'll have some of those players who are coming along to talk about what they're doing. At the same time, we've got people coming from the major incumbent banks like HSBC, who've obviously got a massive franchise and a great legacy and a huge customer base. Their challenge is to adapt that to the latest technological requirements. So how do they use social media? You know, how do they do their online banking? And of course, one of the challenges they've got is they've got existing technology and legacy technology they've got to adapt. So the idea will be to kind of have a little bit of a sort of cross-fertilization here with the new players talking to the old players, with existing players, and see what we can learn. So that's what we've got in store at the conference.
A good, very interesting subject.